Let me tell you, the whole mess started with a sandwich, so nasty it could have starred in a horror flick. You ever have one of those moments when you realize, oh, so this is how it's going to go today? That's exactly what ran through my mind the second that thing hit my tray in first class, looking like it had been dug up from a science experiment. I looked up, and there she was, Claire Wilson, a flight attendant with a smirk so smug you'd think she'd just aced a game of office politics, except this was an airplane, and I wasn't here for her games. You know, I've flown first class enough times to know what's normal and what isn't, and I'd bet my last dollar that a CEO in a hand-tailored suit usually doesn't get handed a moldy sandwich with a side of attitude. But let me back up a sec. Me name's Marcus Reynolds, and I don't just fly with Elite Airways. I own a piece of it. Yeah, that happened. Part silent partner, part watchdog. I like to see how things work without folks knowing who I am. And man, today was going to be one for the books. I was in seat 2A, going from New York to San Francisco. As usual, I try to keep a low profile, head buried in the quarterly performance report on my tablet, when I caught Claire's act right from the start. She's charming enough with the other passenger champagne here, warm smile there. But the minute she saw me, that smile froze, like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Towel," she tossed, barely looking me in the eye. I've seen it before, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's not what's said, it's the way people look right past you. So I played along, keeping it cordial, though on my drink order Macallan 18, set up weeks in advance it didn't show, I started taking mental notes. 10 minutes ticked by. Everyone else was sipping bubbles. I got nothing. When I pressed the call button, Claire came back with a tight little, "We're out of premium beverages. Orange juice or water?" Meanwhile, the bar cart behind her looked like the set of Mad Men, fully stocked. I showed her my confirmation. She just shrugged, muttered about the system, and floated off. I texted Jessica, my assistant, experiencing some interesting service discrepancies. Not that I was spoiling for a fight, but I wasn't about to let this slide, especially with the way she kept serving everyone else in first class like they were family while I was getting the brush off. Things went from bad to worse. When the food service rolled around, the couple across from me got salmon, truffle potatoes, wine pairings, the works. Me, I got a sandwich that looked like it had been living in a damp basement, plus a juice box. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random. I've dealt with a lot in 20 years running Reynolds Technologies, but this was so obvious it was almost insulting. Another passenger, Mr. Whitman, kept giving me sympathetic looks. I could tell he knew something was off. When I tried to address it, Claire just doubled down, insisting some passengers get priority and that I should be grateful. I'm a Platinum Elite member, flown more miles than she's poured drinks, but she acted like I'd snuck into first class on a 2-for-1 coupon. Eventually, I asked to speak to the purser. Instead, I got Michael, another flight attendant, who acted like I was causing trouble just by asking for the meal I'd paid for. He told me to lower my voice, though. Trust me, I hadn't raised it. By this point, the cabin was getting real quiet, people pretending not to notice, but hanging on every word. Twist time. When I lifted the sandwich bread, I saw green mold. Not just old, but science fair mold. I pointed it out, and Michael tried to gaslight Messed he didn't see anything wrong. That's when I requested to speak to the captain, and you could feel the crew's anxiety spike. Claire and Michael started whispering behind the curtain, unaware that the entire premium cabin had eyes and ears and cameras, which I'd personally overseen installing. Here's where things spun out. Claire muttered loud enough for half the row to hear. "Some people just want special treatment." When I pushed for an explanation, she flat out said, "We both know you don't belong here." That was it. The mask was off. It was ugly, open, and for a moment, I felt every eye in that cabin swing my way. Some in shock, some in embarrassment, and a few like Whitman's with growing resolve. Then the captain chimed in over the intercom, warning of disruptive behavior, clearly pinning the blame on me. The crew was desperate to flip the narrative, to turn a simple request for respect into a security issue. But you can only run that script so long before reality catches up. Whitman stood Upia, the quiet banker guy in, said loud enough for everyone, "This is blatant discrimination." People started murmuring agreement. Some filmed on their phones. The purser's poker face cracked. I let them know, as calmly as I could, that I was documenting everything. And, well, let's just say the tension in that plane could have cracked the fuselage. The captain finally emerged, brimming with authority, threatening to divert the flight. I told him, point blank, that there were cameras running and that the board would see every second of what happened in first class. He tried to bluff, but I wasn't budging. What crew instruction have I ignored? That I should eat moldy bread and be grateful. Then Whitman backed me up, and other passengers started speaking out, some with recordings in hand. The captain's confidence wilted. That's when the crew realized just how much trouble they were in, and soon, HR was on the line Diane herself, head of the department, ready and waiting on the ground with legal and PR teams. We ended up landing in Denver, an obvious move to get me off the plane without admitting fault. Passengers were upset. Delays piled up, but the truth was already spreading. Diane met me at the jetway, along with Elite Airways executive team. She apologized in front of everyone, took statements, and let the crew know they'd be removed pending a full investigation. Claire protested. Michael sputtered. The captain tried to assert his authority, but it was over. The surveillance footage was reviewed. Everything was on record: the racist comments, the coordinated mistreatment, the gaslighting attempts. Diane offered me compensation. I said it's not just about me. Every passenger deserves accountability. So, right there, I made a decision. I addressed the entire plane. I told them what happened, who I was, what I expected from an airline that claims to value all its customers. I announced everyone would receive a full refund, 10 grand in compensation, and 5 years of elite status upgrades. It wasn't about the money, it was about making the point that when one person is singled out, everyone pays the price. When I finished, people actually clapped, some in relief, others in solidarity, and a few like that young woman from Coach came up just to say, thank you for not letting it slide. On the way to San Francisco, I called the board chairman, outlined my plan for systemic change, and let him know this was going public, not to drag the company through the mud, but to force the conversation that should have happened years ago. Data from HR showed dozens of similar complaints that went nowhere. That ends now. When we landed, Elite's response team had already set up a war room: analysts, HR, legal, PR. We went through every complaint, every system that had failed to catch what happened to me. We started building new training, new protocols, new oversight. Some board members pushed back, worried about cost, image, but most agreed the cost of not fixing this would be far greater. 6 months later, I flew the same route. The new head attendant greeted me with genuine warmth. Every passenger was treated with respect, and in my seat was a handwritten note from the crew thanking me for setting a new standard. The old crew was gone, their attempts to fight it stymied by the plain evidence of their actions. But it wasn't about punishing individuals. The real legacy was the change it sparked. 3 other airlines adopted our reforms. The industry took notice because sometimes it takes one ugly incident made public and handled transparently to kick open the doors to real accountability. You know, I don't expect perfection, but I do expect progress. That day, I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for every passenger who ever got treated like they didn't belong. And as that plane lifted into the clouds for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could just sit back and be what I paid to be, a passenger. Nothing more, nothing less. Welcomed, respected, and finally seen. So now I want to hear from you: is justice served, or is this just the beginning of a bigger conversation? Tell me what you think, where the line falls between making things right and just making a scene. And if you've ever had an experience that made you rethink where you belong, let's talk about it. That's how we start changing things, one story, one flight at a time.